IVM.
Hello and welcome to Simblified,
Hi,
the show
hi,
where...
hi.
Hey, okay, well done. The show where we attempt to simplify current affairs and random topics with some humor, and we accept any kind of laughter in return, whether you laugh with us, or at your own misfortune. We begin as usual with a random fact about ourselves. So hi, I'm Shriketh, and a traffic cop once let me off by paying 17 rupees as fine for not having a driver's license. All in change, I must add. It was an incredible time back in Ahmedabad when I was a kid. But 17 rupees was all it took. That too in change. So this guy actually asked me for a fine. I was like, he's like, your fine is 100 rupees. I was like, bro, nahi hai. Then he's like 50 rupees. I was like, bro, here's my wallet. This is all I have. I had no notes in there. So he's like, bhari hai kyunki chillar hai. And then he opened my chillar pocket and proceeded to take all the change from in there, which was 17 rupees.
Oh no.
I had a 50 paisa also, which I gave him later. And I said, ruck. And I went away.
Ayyo.
So yes, this was all it took in that time. Yeah. But so that's my random fact.
So change was constant. Huh?
Indeed.
So I actually forgot my random fact, but your story actually brought it back to life. I am probably...
Hi, I'm Chuck.
Oh yeah, that too. Hi, I'm Chuck. And my random fact is I talk about my random facts before introducing myself. I am probably the only person at this table where there was a situation where a beggar returned money to me.
Whoa!
Yeah. So before demonetization, there was another currency that people didn't use. It was these. You remember these flowery 20 paise coins that we used to have? So I collected a bunch of these when I was in college, around like 2002, 3, 4 or something. And I was like, let's get rid of them. And didn't want to throw money, at the end of the day, Goddess Lakshmi and all that. So I then gave it to a beggar at the station. The station guy was like, oh, I'll take this entire bunch. He looked at the thing and he said, nahi chalega, and he gave it back. Nahi chalega in Malayalam, and it was much worse then, actually. Especially when you do not want the situation to happen when your two roommates are with you in an engineering college in Kerala. Anyway.
Well done.
Now I only Paytm beggars.
I'm Naren,
Yes.
and my random fact is I have 2 hairs in each eyebrow which are longer than the other hairs by some 300%. And
Nice.
So my wife...
I noticed that too. Yeah.
So she looks for them and she pulls them out with a tweezer, which is dashed painful. And the damn things reappear like within a week, I don't know what. So if you see a guy with monstrously big eyebrow hairs...
Like singular strands.
Yeah, singular strands.
He's unmarried.
Yeah, it's Narendra Shenoy.
Yeah. Like Kannan Gill was saying, no, like cute guy, clean nose.
Clean, no blackheads.
No blackheads. Oh, good. Now that we know each other a little more.
Yeah, let's move right along. So welcome back. And here's another one of our regular sections, the profundity of the week.
Day, wasn't it?
Huh?
We have to fix a timeline.
Profundity
Technically, it's the profundity of the fortnight.
Profundity of the arbitrary period of time.
We have allocated. Now we need to get another audience to say the whole thing again.
Fine. So whatever it is, the profound WhatsApp forward that has arrived. And this, of course, is a good morning message. So starts off with good morning.
Yeah.
Also has this very gravitas-filled picture of a man doing one very solemn namaste. And it reads, 2 separated hands with all muscle power can't beat 100 people, yet 2 folded palms with no muscle power, but with devotion and humility can win the hearts of the whole world.
No. Wow. You see, in 2011, I was in a car where it veered off and it was going to crash into a truck. Okay, it was very bad, and I had an accident and 2 surgeries after that. And I could see, like in that split second, I could see, oh shit, this is going to happen. You could see that danger coming. You could see something horrible is going to happen. That exactly happened over here right now with folded hands. I knew, oh no, devotion is coming, prayer is coming. Oh no, brace. Yeah, anyway, I think I still preferred the accident.
But
Yeah.
some seriously like super profound stuff. Like it also brings in like again, see the whole thing is devotion is not complete without pseudoscience. Muscle power has to be mentioned here. It's not just like strength; it's muscle power. Like,
opposed to musli
it's like
power.
a unit also. Like how many namaskars unit? It's a unit of power.
You see, there used to be this email forward in the old days, probably you guys weren't born at that time, which said that remember that when someone irritates you, it takes 176 muscles in your face to frown. But only 4 muscles, so you're expecting to smile, but only 4 muscles to extend your hand and slap the motherfucker. It was
Also assumes that if you keep frowning, then you can lose weight, no? Technically.
I know, yeah.
Yeah.
So potentially like great workout techniques. Be pissed off all the time. But yes, now that the introductions are done, let's talk a bit about the topic that we're going to cover today, which is the very welcome news that Section 377 has been repealed, and therefore decriminalization of homosexuality has happened in India. And so we'll be talking a bit about, we'll be trying to understand what this Section 377 was.
The history.
The what it entailed, how it affected LGBTQ people in our country.
Yeah, not just in our country, but like how the UK basically shat all over the world. And
exactly. How this was a colonial era rule, which was
some surprising countries that are still.
So we'll look through how LGBTQ rights are done across the world. We look at some amazing facts about homosexuality, some really amazing and funny facts about homosexuality, and we also look at some etymology at the end, which is about
profound
this topic.
And depressing
profound and depressing etymology. Just a disclaimer though, we are 3 heteronormative cisgendered males who are talking about an incredibly sensitive topic. So we ask for your forgiveness in advance if we do use certain pronouns or say some stuff that might be inappropriate. It's entirely inadvertent and we are in the process of learning. So we see you on the other side of this break.
Did I just catch you on your way to work? Or did you end up pulling an all-nighter? Let me guess. You have a packed schedule for the day, the week, and probably the month and the year. That's a lot for your mind to handle, don't you think? This buzzing chaos also brings tons of negative thoughts. Am I right? Try spinning that bottle in a positive direction with me, Chetna, on the Positively Unlimited podcast, every Monday on IBM Podcasts. It's time to change your life one alphabet at a time.
So let's start with a story, which starts in 1994. A journalist in Delhi, Sunil Mehra, was assigned to cover a Bharatnatyam performance. He attended the event and was so besotted by the dancer that he returned to his office and told his editor he could no longer cover the story with the journalistic integrity that was required of him. Little did anyone suspect that this cute incident would be the pivotal point in the Indian judicial and cultural history. Because
Superb.
The dancer Mr. Mehra fell in love with was famed Sangeet Natak Academy awardee Navteej Singh Johar, a man. And this couple were the lead petitioners to the Supreme Court challenging the constitutionality of Section 377. So they, along with many other petitioners, they came together and challenged the constitutionality. And this case, to use its full Christian name, and this one's a doozy, is Navteej Singh Johar and others versus Union of India through Secretary Ministry of Law and Justice. Is the full Christian name of this judgment.
That sounds like a complicated sexual position.
Vaya and vaya. Wow. And the petitioners were, of course, the dancer Navteej Singh Johar, his partner Sunil, who was a journalist, Sunil Mehra. There was chef Ritu Dalmia, hoteliers Aman Nath and Keshav Suri, and a businesswoman Aisha Kapoor. Specifically, it happened to be, in fact, this was one of the very first cases in front of the Supreme Court where the petitioners had all argued. They were not what is called amicus curiae, which is like friend of the court, who are petitioning for the larger good of the society, but they were all petitioning as they are directly aggrieved because of Section 377 being alleging that it was a direct violation of their fundamental rights. So what it involved, and this was the risky part of the whole thing, was that they called out in the petition itself that they were homosexuals. So that was actually tremendously brave on their part because they were in legal proceedings claiming that they are homosexuals, which is by the law before the judgment was passed, a criminal act. So they were saying we are being criminalized we are criminals currently, but we want to be decriminalized. So it was incredibly brave from their
So I
perspective.
have a question here. Was it illegal to be a homosexual or just indulge in homosexual acts?
So this is where it came. This is where. So let's actually look at the Section 377 itself.
Okay.
Let's look at the
Okay.
text of Section 377, right? So what happened was...
This was a colonial law.
Of course. So Section 377 was introduced in 1861.
Okay.
During the British rule, of course, and it was entirely modelled on, in fact, a law which was much older, called the Buggery Act.
And just to tell you how old this was, Naren hadn't started college by this time.
I know. It was just like somewhere in his young adolescence in 1533. But yes, so effectively, a law that was effectively conceptualized in the 14th century was finally decriminalized in India in the 21st. So, and we complain about our dear leader for no progress for Achhe Din when it was only promised in 2014.
Fair enough, we've been unfair on the chap.
No. But it is an enormous achievement. I mean, jokes apart, I'm no fan of this government, but they chose not to pursue it, and which is how it sailed through the courts, and for which they faced and are continuing to face, even as we speak, a lot of unhappiness from their core constituency.
Correct. Yeah, so they're facing, in fact, the thing is, while it was brave also on their part to not pursue it, but they are also facing a lot of flack for, in fact, post the judgment, they left it. So the official stance was, we will leave it to the knowledge of the court.
Yes.
So their official stance was that, and they left it to it to that. But a lot of people are like,
which was the wisest thing to do.
From their perspective, I mean, considering their core and their who they're appealing to, especially right-wing people entirely, and very religious, very core religious groups who actively wanted to keep homosexuality as a criminal offense. Their stance actually is admirable in some way overall. But anyway, so
back to the 14th century.
Back to the 14th century and back to what the Section 377 is like. And
can I butt in with a quick joke?
Of course.
So
always.
This buggery reminds me. So that's what homosexual intercourse was called, buggery, right?
Buggery, yes.
And apparently,
specifically anal
so
sex,
I had someone told me that the 5-day week was invented by Robinson Crusoe, because he was always buggered by Friday. So, okay, proceed to the next one.
Yeah.
Oh, Naren.
So we can, the section, to get a better understanding of Section 377, we can actually narrate the section in its entirety because it's only 65 words long.
What?
The entire Section 377 that was repealed is only 65 words long and goes like this. It says Section 377 called unnatural offences. Whoever voluntarily has carnal intercourse against the order of nature with any man, woman or animal shall be punished with imprisonment for life or with imprisonment of either description for a term which may extend to 10 years and also be liable to fine. Explanation. Penetration is sufficient to constitute the carnal intercourse necessary to the offence described in this section. Now, the first thing that comes across is that nowhere is homosexuality directly called out anywhere.
Yeah.
It only talks about carnal intercourse against the order of nature. Now, order of nature is incredibly arbit to whoever is in power at that time defining it. And
to like any mechanical engineer having sex itself is against the order of nature.
And there we have lost all of our three mechanical core demographic.
Apologies.
But yes.
One hapless mechanical engineer host who's trying his best to feel infuriated. He's sort of dissolving into a paroxysm of...
No, your MBA saves you.
Porters by forces specifically. But anyway, so in fact, the act is so ambiguously worded that forget homosexual intercourse altogether. Even non-regular intercourse, which can come under the ambit of being criminal, which means any kinds of adventurous and of course consensual sex, even with your own wife, can land you in the jailhouse for a decade.
Yeah.
So, and potentially and the other thing is that the severity of the crime, which goes all the way from life imprisonment to 10 years to a fine. So the thing is, the scope also of the crime is defined so randomly that people who are booked under this are like always under fear that they are told potentially it can extend to life imprisonment. So you are completely screwed possibly, or you can just get off with a fine or a warning, or just
figuratively and literally.
Yeah. So then again, the thing is, Section 377 was never it's not a big victory from a criminal point of view, because since the last 150 years when the law has been in force, less than 200 people have been actually booked under it. It was mostly because of the fact that it's such a ridiculous rule, and homosexuals have never been, because the Indian justice system, for all its flaws, has been kind enough to homosexual people that they have dismissed such cases when they have come up to this thing. So no, there are no people who are actually serving life sentences or
because
anything.
Of this. So when you say booked, it was like just brought to the
court. To the fore. But what this did, now what the problem with why Section 377, so then people might argue, and as a lot of right-wing activists have, that nobody is getting prosecuted, why do you have to repeal it? The problem that came across is the fact that while it didn't exactly make you a criminal, it denied gay people what was called agency. Agency is the right to exist. Agency is the right to think. Agency is the right to identify yourself publicly. Now, what this did is, because you are not able to identify yourself publicly, of course, you don't exist as an individual, because your existence itself is criminal. And what that did was that a whole bunch of people, and also another thing, it has opened itself up to harassment. Tremendous
extortion, actually. I'll use a stronger word.
Extortion,
I know
harassment.
Gay friends who have been victimized by police.
Exactly, So they're victimized by police, they're harassed on the streets. Even former, so for example, if someone finds out, your neighbor, for example, finds out that you're a homosexual, they can threaten or blackmail you even to put you in behind bars and stuff like that. You have to keep your identity very secure. You can't. You have to make sure that people other than your trusted friend circle don't find out that you are a homosexual or openly gay in any way. So it's about living as your life being a sin. So in fact, it kind of refers to what Trevor Noah talked about, where he talks about his life as a colored person in South Africa, and he calls himself born a crime. So they're effectively born criminals, and for no fault of theirs, of course, because homosexuality isn't something that you develop or you choose. It's something that you are. So that is one of the biggest problems that this particular case had. And of course, the other part about what this particular law did was, it brings it actually. So people, the petitioners who brought about the case, while they were gay people and they must have suffered a whole host of injustices, they were all people from privilege. They are all people who are
hoteliers,
dancers, very famous people. And in fact, their privilege has protected them quite significantly and allowed them even to pursue a very even flamboyant lifestyle if they chose it. But what it really affects, Section 377 really affects, is the marginalized, the lower class of sex workers, the transsexuals, the people who are not from wealth, who actually are openly, who are probably very visibly not normal, so to speak. So these people, and who can't do anything about it. So these people are the ones who are shunned by society. They have all the stigma associated to being that. They are harassed. They're even raped. So for example, there is a huge problem with crimes against homosexuals. So for example, homosexual people would get raped and they wouldn't even approach the police because their existence is a crime. So you can't go to the cops and say that, boss, I was raped. And then if you are in the process identified as being a gay person, there is another crime while trying to report a crime done unto you. So it was quite a regressive law in that way. So in fact, a bit of the history of this particular law, it's always been, the gay rights movement in India kind of started gaining steam in the 21st century. By 2009, the case was against Delhi, the Delhi government, which was Nas Foundation versus the government of NCT of Delhi, National Capital Territory of Delhi. So in 2009, the Delhi High Court actually gave the very progressive judgment of actually decriminalizing homosexuality. But because it was done by a lower court and not the Supreme Court, there was a chance that it would get recriminalized, so to speak, which did happen.
In 2013, right?
In 2013. So in 2013, basically what the Delhi government argued is that it is a violation of the right to privacy. So the right to privacy then and said that it was unconstitutional by that logic. Now in 2013, for reasons unknown or biases of certain judges, they said that we do not find this law to be unconstitutional. On the basis of technicality, recriminalized homosexuality, saying that if you're challenging the constitutionality of this law, it is not unconstitutional. But what has happened in the recent past and the recent Supreme Court, which has been really progressive in its ways, which earlier this year recognized the right to privacy. So recognize that every individual has the right to have a private life, the right to be anonymous, the right to keep things in their life private. And that actually is the core of what decriminalizing homosexuality comes on. It's about the right to have a life within your four walls, the right to do whatever you please in consent with other people behind in your bedroom without the cops barging in and passing their morality onto it. So that was a fundamental statement that was made by the judges at this point of time. And it must be noted that the judges made several progressive statements during that. In fact, one of the judges were even caught weeping while the judgment was being passed out of joy, because they were that progressive and that touched personally through the entire issue. So on that note, let's take a bit of a break and come back and talk a bit more about gay rights in this country.
You know what it's been? Like every week has been an awesome week on IVM. This week on IVM, we got the 300th episode of Cyrus Says. To mark this milestone, Cyrus has an MTV VJ reunion with Malaika and Nikhil Chinappa. Listen in for tons of laughter and nostalgia. You really, really don't want to miss this. 300 episodes! On The Scene and the Unseen, Amit Verma is joined by a farmer leader, Gunwant Patil, to discuss India's agricultural crisis and the state of farmers. On Know Your Kanun, lawyer and host Amber Rana helps us to understand the complexities related to the laws and rights regarding cruelty. Last week on the Pragati podcast, Pawan and guest host Shambhavi Nayak were joined by renowned scientist Dr. Kumarasamy Thangaraj to discuss the great genetic diversity of India. On the Kinetic Living podcast this week, Coach Urmi talks to stand-up comic and the host of Keeping It Queer, Naveen Narona, about his busy schedule and the struggle to create a fitness regime for himself. And as always, if you're not following us on social media, please make sure that you do. We are IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We do a lot of really interesting stuff over there. Also, make sure you check out our YouTube channel. We have this thing called IVM CCTV over there where we give you guys a glimpse into the studio. And with that, let's continue with your show.
And welcome back. We are looking at the repeal of the regressive Section 377. And it's taking us to the history and go on.
So while homosexuality has been decriminalized in this country, it's not the final victory. It is in fact the very beginning of gay rights, so to speak. So there are two ends of the spectrum. So what decriminalizing means is that it kind of moves people from saying that your existence itself is a crime to saying that we recognize your existence. That's where it ends.
As equal citizens.
As equal citizens.
Yeah.
But the part about equal citizens is not entirely equal until a lot of other rights come into play.
Oh, fair.
So first let's look at, by doing this, India has, while a little later, because the majority of the decriminalizations of homosexuality happened, like for example, in the UK happened in 1967, and in the US entirely. So the US has a more federal system, so state by state the decriminalization happens. So the last one actually happened very recently in 2003. So it was only decriminalized entirely in 2003 in the US, across the US. So, but there are many more gay rights that come into play. But
so, like say, the UK have gone and shot over everywhere, and they've cleaned up their act.
They cleaned up. They repealed their own law ages ago, and in India it's just gotten repealed now.
So it's basically all the old British colonies.
So a lot of countries still have homosexuality as tremendously illegal. Like for example, of course, all the Middle Eastern countries. Like for example, there is Saudi Arabia, Iran, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Sudan. All those places, it's punishable.
Cheerful vestiges of liberal living.
All these places is immediately punishable by death. But there is also like many death, like straight by hanging and all that stuff. But there are also like many, like of course it's not clearly, I mean it's always not like straight away this thing. It's more high profile cases that death is imposed. But a lot of the smaller punishments are equally cruel.
Like for example,
there's stoning in Yemen. There's flogging, caning, castration in Saudi Arabia. There is, in other countries, there is a lot of like just torture for homosexuals in some way or the other. So that is there. In Africa also there are states like Nigeria, Mauritania, Somalia, Somaliland. So all of these countries also have it punishable by death, otherwise imprisonment in a lot of cases. I mean, these are just the legal remedies. I mean, of course, if it's legally already, it's legally so harsh. Of course, the treatment of LGBTQ community people it's always like tremendously bad. So in Asia, Afghanistan technically still has death penalty for homosexuality, but it's not been imposed since the Taliban left. So I assume, but I'm still assuming the treatment of LGBTQ people isn't very stellar still. But
in Afghanistan, the treatment of nobody is very stellar. So it's a very low bar to begin with.
This reminds me of this this joke about this British journalist who goes to Afghanistan to study the people over there, and he finds all the women walking about 10 paces behind their husbands. And he writes in his journal saying that, oh, look at what a regressive culture this is. Women are walking behind men, and this is like really terrible. And then he says, I want to interview one of these women. So he goes and talks to one of these women. And it's like, don't you feel oppressed by the fact that you have to walk 10 paces behind your husband? She's like, no. Like, why? Landmines. So, that aside, it is still technically illegal in Afghanistan to be gay.
So where else is it legal now?
So if you look at it from that way, it's Europe. The European Union has it entirely legal.
Entirely, all of it,
yeah.
Including like the random fringes who don't want Euro,
so while
Switzerland.
So the point is, while the entire spectrum of gay rights are not entirely this thing, but it's decriminalized everywhere. The European Union has passed it that way. In North America also, it's entirely that way.
Australia, New Zealand,
New Zealand, South America, large parts of South America also.
South Africa also, I think.
Africa as well. Africa itself is a little patchy, so the northern parts of Africa are more where the crazy death penalties and all that stuff are there. Central Africa, surprisingly, almost entirely, it's decriminalized.
Wow.
Central Africa. And Southern Africa, it's
with
again...
With the honorable exception of Uganda. There it's a death penalty.
Yeah, Uganda as well. Yeah, so there is death penalty. So there are it's there here and there.
Any surprising countries where it's criminalized?
So there are surprising countries where it's criminalized and surprising countries where it's not. So, like for example, Malaysia, which is very liberal otherwise. It's a Muslim it's a Muslim dominated country.
Theocratic. It's a Muslim theocratic.
Theocratic.
The state religion is Muslim.
Yeah, but then they're one of the most liberal Muslim countries there is. And yet their homosexuality is not just illegal, but it's also prosecuted quite often. So, and there are these almost like these roving squads of people who take it upon themselves to kind of prosecute homosexuals. Like holding hands is also you can get floggings, you can get canings, and you can get up to 10 years in jail. So Malaysia is there. Singapore is one of the big ones, where Singapore has for being one of the most technically advanced countries, it's got
everything.
It's got a very open economy. It's got it's the gateway to the world effectively. But there also it's been it's technically illegal for with criminal retribution for about 3 years. But the funny thing is here. So Singapore has a couple of funny parts to it. One, that male homosexuality is banned. Female homosexuality isn't. So being a lesbian isn't. So that's
progress.
Yeah, what a weird way to be progressive, right? It's like
law made by somebody watching a lot of stuff on the internet.
It's like taking one step forward and realizing you are on a travelator going backwards.
Yeah. But to be fair, in Singapore, since 1999, nobody has been even booked on that law. So
they're all too busy doing.
Yeah, they're also probably on the way of getting it.
Yeah, the difference is Singapore people have no time to be outraged. They're going too many jobless people as a problem.
So the surprisingly, and this is the funny thing, there is a country where homosexuality has never been illegal. Okay, but it is the country which you would least expect it to be. Can you guess this one?
North Korea.
Yes. Homosexuality has never been criminalized over there.
Wow. You know what else has not been?
Cannabis. I swear to God, I think North Korea is the place to be. They have denied basic freedoms and freedom of speech and all that stuff. But ganja, bhuko, and love whoever you want. It's all good.
To be fair, I think that's all. Some people might not.
Some people might not want anything else. So yeah, I mean, as far as that is concerned, North Korea is super progressive. Wow. And other chill places that have no chill for gay people are Jamaica. And Barbados. So while Jamaica is all for the ganja culture, and they also have this, they basically are suffering under colonial era hangover laws. So they have the same Section 377 equivalents, which are used to largely harass LGBT people. There also, it's not active prosecution, but it's more harassment of LGBT people. So that's about illegality. But even within legality, there are many grades. Like, for example, there's just vanilla legality, which India has just achieved. So there is where you recognize LGBT people's right to exist. There is also another gender identity law, which is that India has been more progressive about and passed in 2014. Can you guys guess which one?
The third
Third
gender.
gender, you're right. The recognition of transgendered people.
In fact, I think Pakistan is even more progressive.
Even more progressive, exactly. Pakistan has been even more progressive and passed it much earlier.
Much earlier, yeah.
But India passed it in 2014. And
actually, historically, we have a long history of.
And in fact, in India, even culturally, transgendered people have a place. I mean, they are not recognized as equals or anything. But they have a place, and they are not like
not outcast.
This is the one legit thing on WhatsApp that you can say it's there in the scriptures somewhere. The Vedas say that gods who are gay and gods who are transgender. It is.
I don't know about the god, but it was definitely part of the Mughal, as the Islamic princely states had always their harems looked after by eunuchs.
Eunuchs, exactly, yeah. So, I mean, in fact, the funny thing is Pakistan and India, therefore, are much more progressive than countries like Luxembourg and the Vatican, of course. Because their transgender are not even recognized. They are like and Luxembourg is apparently the richest country in the world. So, they don't have that.
Amazing. So, if an alien race comes and their only criteria for progress was recognition of a third gender and ability at cricket, then we would
India and Pakistan would be ballers. No, but Pakistan would win because their prime minister is a cricketer himself. So there. But so the next step is so from a gay rights point of view, the next step for India, which would be is recognizing same-sex unions. So there is a legal recognition of unions as well, right? You can recognize the fact that the state recognize LGBT couples. So there is a difference between recognizing same-sex unions and marriage. Marriage is another instrument altogether, but same-sex unions allows people to recognize like your gay or lesbian or transgendered partner as a partner and gives them rights like tax benefits, inheritance, co-ownership rights, all of these things which are part of everyday life. LGBTQ people can have. And
marriage is a part of this, or that's
no, marriage is the next step. So in the US, like for example, recently, like last year, I think marriage was finally legalized. Before this, same-sex unions were recognized. So they recognize that this person is a partner who's been living with this person for a long time, but there was no legal recognition of a title of marriage. So marriage is the final step, effectively.
And in the US, did it happen like federally or?
So which is what happened last year was the Supreme Court legalized it across all states. So earlier it was federally happening across individual states, but the Supreme Court then legalized gay marriage across.
And the floods that have been happening in the US since have been the tears of Mike Pence.
Exactly. And another step is also which is allowing LGBTQ peoples to serve openly in the military. Which is also a big part, where the US famously had this doctrine called "Don't Ask, Don't Tell," which was basically saying that the military will not ask if you're a LGBTQ member, and you don't openly reveal it.
If you are under no compulsion to admit to your sexual orientation.
Exactly. So if you don't admit it, if you do, then you will be discharged. So if you openly admit the fact that you are a homosexual, then you will be discharged. Because the official rule is that...
This reminds me of a Yes Minister or Yes Prime Minister
Of course it does.
And so these guys are talking about, the NATO and the army and everything like that. And so these guys are talking about the importance of having some kind of military assistance from the United States. And the guy, I don't remember, but exactly the joke is this. So he says, I don't know about the American army because very often you don't know whether they are men or women till they arrive here. And then Humphrey says, sometimes not even then.
No, and there was another very famous case of this the first US gay service member who was to come out during the Vietnam War. His name was Leonard Matlovich, and he was actually, because he was openly gay, he was discharged from the military after he got a medal. So when he died, he insisted on being buried without a name, known only as the gay Vietnam veteran.
Wow.
He had it written on his tombstone saying gay Vietnam veteran, and his epitaph is the most baller thing ever. His epitaph read, "When I was in the military, they gave me a medal for killing 2 men and a discharge for loving 1.
Wow.
So that was one of the most epic lines ever.
What a what a line.
Yeah, and so there are a whole bunch of other random facts about homosexuality, and this kind of shows how prevalent homosexuality has been in general human society. So the world's oldest porn, which dates back to over 3,000 years, features both male on male, female on female, and male and female couples. So there's all kinds of. So the first porn was all like
Where was
inclusive. This is from I think ancient Egypt.
Wow.
I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's ancient Egypt. Also,
I wouldn't be like they always say, porn is like what drives the tech industry. Wouldn't be surprised if like
Drones,
tablets
yeah.
or hieroglyphics were started
Hieroglyphs.
for this.
Yeah, and again, this is another amazing line from again ancient Egypt. The oldest ever pickup line was apparently said between two men. A mythological story from the 20th dynasty of ancient Egypt between Horus and Set, who quarreled for 80 years on who should rule. Seth apparently attempted to persuade Horus to sleep with him, saying, how lovely are your buttocks and how muscular are your thighs. Then they had sex. So,
But all this while they were fighting.
yeah, they fought for 80 years and they had sex.
Wow.
So, yeah.
It's usually the other way around.
Oh man, amazing.
Yeah.
And another one from ancient Egypt again was two male royal manicurists named, okay, I'm not able to read these, but they are Nyan-Khumnum and Khnumhotep, were found buried together in a shared tomb similar to the way married couples were often buried. Their epigraph reads joined in life and joined in death. Having lived in 2400 BC, they are believed to be history's oldest recorded gay couple.
Wow. And this is again Egypt.
And that means recognized. They were recognized as a gay couple, and they were even recognized in death and almost buried respectfully that way. So yeah, that's there. And in 17th century London, there was a gay brothel on the site where Buckingham Palace is today. So, yes, we all know what is that holy site of Buckingham Palace now. Also, Jimi Hendrix pretended to be gay to get out of the army in 1962.
Another awesome fact about Jimi Hendrix with respect to homosexuality is that he was widely rumored to be gay, one because of this and two because his famous song Purple Haze has a line called excuse me while I
Kiss the
sky. And a lot of people said that he meant it to be excuse me while I kiss this guy. So
yeah, I mean that was also. I mean,
and you can't unhear it.
When you hear it, you definitely can't unhear it. There's another one which is actually a trope in a lot of TV shows in the US especially. Doctor Who actor John Barrowman nearly got the role of Will in Will and Grace in 1998. Will, who was famously gay in the show, but he lost the part when producers thought he was too straight. Barrowman is actually gay, and Eric McCormack, who got the part, is straight.
Oh, wow.
And this is also again repeated in Modern Family, where there are Mitch and Cameron, who is Jesse Tyler Ferguson and Eric Stone Street, and Cameron is the more flamboyantly gay of the couple, and Mitch is the more reserved gay.
Yeah.
Cameron is actually super straight, and Mitch is actually the gay person in real life.
Amazing. But I know this is a total digression, but the guy who played Cam, do you know that he almost, because of him, Osama almost did not get caught?
Eric Stone Street, why?
Yeah. So what happened was this guy I know it's a total digression, but it's just too interesting a fact that I heard this somewhere. He was invited to one of those White House correspondent dinner type things, and somebody was supposed to give him a tour, or somebody promised him a tour of the White House at that point of time. That guy wasn't there because he was in the room planning with Obama about taking that famous scene is there, right? And notoriously at the White House correspondence, whichever party this was, there are always journalists hanging around to figure out, okay, who is missing. So they'll join that also. This guy's not here, so probably that's happening. So they were all they knew that some plot was on to catch Osama. And this guy said, hey, I was supposed to get a tour, but this guy is not here. A journalist almost heard it or something, and somebody else was covering up saying, no, he's, I'll take you around. And that got
Oh,
that
wow.
got nipped in the bud. I don't know how true the story is. I just heard it somewhere, but I think it's fascinating anyway.
Wow.
Quite amazing.
So yeah, Cam from Modern Family. Oh, yeah.
And Manny looks like Diego Maradona, man. So, woman pointed it out, and afterwards I can't look at either of them. Either of them with a straight face. Yeah. Manny and Diego Maradona are the same guy.
Then the final amazing fact about homosexuals is that the Chinese news agency Xinhua dubiously reported on the apparent existence of a Swedish town in 2009, a town of 25,000 lesbians forbidden to speak to men. Do you know what followed? Can you guess what followed?
Rush for Swedish visas.
Several Swedish tourism sites crashed due to the number of Chinese visitors. So those are some random facts about homosexuals and the homosexuality through history. And finally, actually, on a slightly depressing yet enlightening note, there is an etymology that we can consider on this topic, which is about the word faggot. So the word faggot has quite often been used as a pejorative or an insult to a lot of gay people. And if you actually understand the origins of the word faggot, it's even more depressing about that. So in fact, I heard about this etymology in this show called Louis, which is the now disgraced Louis C.K.'s show, where his friend, he's playing cards with his friends, and this guy is a gay comic, and they're all kind of saying that, do you get offended if we call you faggot? And he's like, I don't really care about it. But then he proceeds to tell the people about the origin of the word faggot. So now faggot, translated in French to some extent, means a bundle of sticks. Now you might wonder why it's being used that way, and this is anecdotal. But famously, it's supposed to be that when in the Dark Ages, when witches were being burnt at stakes, at that time, witches were put through trial and all that stuff, and then convicted of being witches and then burnt at the stake. Homosexuals, on the other hand, were not even afforded trials or anything like that. So, in fact, they were considered to be so worthless that while witches were burnt at the stake and they were given a stake full of wood, the homosexuals were burnt alongside with faggot, which is kindling, just a bunch of sticks. So they were thrown along with the sticks to be burnt at the stake. So that is it's actually the word itself is so humiliating to homosexuals that they are
cruel.
They're so worthless that they are not even worth the wood to be burnt on.
Wow.
So it's actually a very cruel etymology. It's a very cruel way of what the comic
actually a lot of our homosexual humor is rooted in that cruelty.
Yeah.
So it is we are not sensitive to it because most of us aren't homosexual. But if you are, it does hurt.
Yeah, it does. And which is where whenever, so that's what the comic proceeds to say. Whenever a young man in the US who is gay is called a faggot, they are all aware of this etymology, and the entire weight of the persecution through history and their own personal experiences bears down on them. So actually, if you look at it this way, it's not just about homosexuals, but in India, it's especially if you look at words like chinky, for example, which we use for northeastern people or for people who have Asian features in some way or the other. It's also such a pejorative term, and people want to use it as a joke sometimes with their friends who maybe understand the word.
I believe it's banned, right? It's not. There is some kind of
there is legislation. Yeah, I mean, along with all the other words for lower caste people, I think this is one of those words that is banned. But so this is an etymology for this thing. So, I mean, along with, I think while to kind of put this entire thing together, to kind of sum up this entire topic, I think while we are currently living a very historic moment where legally homosexuality has been decriminalized. I think socially it's still to be decriminalized, and that's a longer process
much longer.
Where people accept homosexuals as part of society, accept them as friends, accept them as normal people.
I have to tell you one thing. So one of my friends shared this with me. One of his classmates, my friend is my age, one of his friends is a gay person. And he sort of celebrated the repeal of 377 on his Facebook page. And a lot of people sort of wished him and, sort of congratulated him. And my friend was saying, many of them were his former teachers who knew right from then.
Yeah.
And who took a lot of care even back then. So the world is not all that bad.
Yeah.
So it's, there is hope.
Yeah, there is always hope.
Yeah, I really think it's I hope it's the first step towards a better future.
In fact, there is a great quote by Mehra itself. Mehra, who was one of the petitioners, the lead petitioners of that. He gave an interview to The Guardian, and his quote was, he talks about himself and this guy, Johar, and says, "We have been okay. I am 63. We have lived our lives. We have fought for our bit of sun and we found it. It was more for all those who did not have our class privilege, education, intellect, money and connections to insulate them. It was so that they could these other lives could be lived in the sun rather than in borrowed dark spaces."
Wow.
Well said.
Fantastic.
Well said.
So, can't think of a better way to end. Like, full circle has come, basically. Yeah, so that's about it, guys. Find your local Pride chapter, I would say, and support the cause. It's like we said, it's the beginning rather than an ending. And the bigger battle is just coming. So yeah, that's about it from us, and we will see you soon at another Simplified episode near you. In the meantime, if you haven't, then you should subscribe to us on, the podcasting apps and all that. We are part of the IVM Podcast Network, who has a lot of other awesome shows. You can follow them on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And download the podcast app as well to find all the awesome latest shows.
And stay safe, stay proud, and stay simplified.
Wow.
Look! Up in the internet! It's a meme! No! It's a cat video! No! It's the Geek Fruit Podcast!
That's right, we interrupt this riveting broadcast to tell you about our show, the Geek Fruit Podcast, where Tejas, Dinkar, and I, Jishnu, talk about everything in pop culture, including DC, Marvel, Star Wars, Netflix, and everything in between.
You know how your friends hate it when you ramble about some nerdy crap and you just want somebody to listen to you? Well, sorry, there's nothing we can do about that, but come listen to us ramble and it'll almost be like the real thing. Kind of.
Listen to new episodes of the Geek Fruit Podcast every Monday and the Geek Fruit Bulletin every Thursday on iTunes, Google Podcasts, the IVM app, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Happy listening, you nerds.
Shunyavan, 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 Shunyavan.
$1 billion acquisition. Another copycat startup got formed.
No, the tech world in India is surely moving double the speed of this voiceover.
Tune in to Shunya One every Tuesday to catch us talking to the smartest people we know on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get your podcasts from.